In the heart of the 19th century, a period defined by the relentless expansion of European power, the world was being redrawn by force. Imperial giants, fueled by industrial might and an unshakable belief in their own destiny, were carving up the globe with ink and iron. Their armies were paragons of a new kind of warfare, professional soldiers armed with modern rifles, drilled in the precise arts of conquest. They had toppled ancient kingdoms, shattered dynasties, and planted their flags on continents far from their own shores. They saw themselves as an unstoppable, civilizing force, the very pinnacle of military and cultural evolution. But in the vibrant, complex tapestry of West Africa, within the boundaries of the Kingdom of Dahomey, they encountered a military power so utterly alien to their understanding, so profoundly ferocious, that it transcended the pages of military reports and became the stuff of nightmares and legends. This was an army that defied every convention the European invaders held dear. Its frontline soldiers were not men hardened by years of campaigning, nor was it led by a grizzled, patriarchal king or a seasoned warlord whose name was whispered in fear across the plains. According to the legends that swirled around this force, legends that both terrified and fascinated outsiders, its most celebrated commander was someone they could never have conceived of in their most fevered dreams, a 16-year-old girl. His is the story of Seh-Dong-Hong-Beh, a name that deserves to be remembered alongside the great warrior leaders of history. And it is inextricably the story of her army, the elite, all-female military corps known as the Dahomey Amazons. However, the true narrative is not a simple recounting of myth. The real story begins where we dare to peel back the layers of legend, speculation, and colonial propaganda to find the truth. This is the forgotten history of one of Africa's most formidable fighting forces, and the young warrior who led them into a battle that would echo for generations to come. To comprehend the emergence of a warrior like Seh-Dong-Hong-Beh, one must first delve into the unique and brutal crucible that was her homeland. The Kingdom of Dahomey, located in what is now modern-day Benin, was not like its neighbors. It was a society meticulously, almost singularly, engineered for conflict. From its very inception in the 1600s, Dahomey's existence was defined by relentless expansion. Its power grew with each successive military campaign, each conquered village, each subjugated rival. For the kings who ruled this formidable state, war was not merely a tool of policy. It was a sacred, ancestral duty. An axiom was passed from one king to the next. They must always strive to make Dahomey ever larger. This relentless drive for conquest became the kingdom's lifeblood, its primary purpose, and its eventual curse. This perpetual state of warfare, however, exacted a devastating toll. Centuries of conflict, compounded by the horrifying machinery of the transatlantic slave trade, had catastrophically drained the kingdom's male population. Dahomey was caught in a vicious cycle. It was forced to offer many of its own men as tribute to the larger, more powerful Oyo Empire, a humiliating price for a fragile autonomy. Simultaneously, it sold countless others to European slave traders who anchored their ships off the coast. In exchange for human lives, Dahomey received the very tools it needed to continue its cycle of violence: guns, gunpowder, and alcohol. This grim trade left the kingdom facing a critical, existential crisis, a severe shortage of men to fill the ranks of its armies and defend its borders. Faced with the prospect of annihilation, the kings of Dahomey made a decision that was as pragmatic as it was revolutionary. They would turn to the other half of their population. They would turn to their women. What began as a specialized corps of female elephant hunters known as the Gbedo, women already respected for their courage and skill, and later evolved into a formidable royal bodyguard, was systematically transformed. Under the visionary and militaristic rule of King Gizo in the early 1800s, these disparate groups were unified and formalized into a permanent, standing army. European travelers and colonial officers, witnessing this phenomenon for the first time, were utterly astounded. The sight of thousands of women, armed and marching in disciplined formations, was so contrary to their own deeply ingrained societal norms that they reached for the only comparison they could find. They called them the Dahomey Amazons, a name that invoked the warrior women of ancient Greek mythology. But to their own people, these soldiers were known by a far more intimate and powerful name: the Mino, which translates to our mothers. These were not ceremonial guards or a decorative palace troop. The Mino were an elite, frontline fighting force, and their training was deliberately engineered to be unimaginably brutal, a physical and psychological trial by fire designed to forge them into perfect instruments of war. Girls, sometimes recruited as young as their early teens, were taken from their families, severing all past ties to begin a new life dedicated entirely to military discipline. They were formally, though symbolically, considered wives of the king. This was a complex social status that conferred upon them immense prestige and power, but it also came with a profound sacrifice. It demanded absolute celibacy and forbade them from bearing children, a measure designed to ensure their loyalty was directed solely and unconditionally to the king and the state. Their training regimen was a relentless process of hardening, designed to strip them of all fear and remake them from the ground up. They learned to withstand unimaginable pain, a quality tested in horrifying drills. One such exercise required them to storm defensive fortifications constructed from razor-sharp acacia thorns, a brutal charge that would tear at their bare skin. They were expected to complete this task without flinching, without a single cry of pain, demonstrating absolute emotional control. Some European accounts, which must be viewed with skepticism as they were often prone to sensationalism, describe even darker ceremonies. These tales speak of initiation rituals where new recruits were forced to hurl captured prisoners of war from a high platform to their deaths below, a method of desensitizing them to the act of killing and steeling them for the savagery of the battlefield. Their transformation was total, a rebirth into a new identity, which they declared in their powerful battle chant. As the blacksmith takes an iron bar and by fire changes its fashion, they sang, "So have we changed our nature. We are no longer women, we are men." This brutal, systematic process created some of the most effective and feared soldiers on the African continent. European accounts from the period, written by men who were often both horrified and deeply impressed, consistently noted that the female regiments of Dahomey were more disciplined, more aggressive, and often more skilled in combat than their male counterparts. Their elite status was absolute. When the Mino walked through the streets of the capital, a servant would walk ahead of them, constantly ringing a small bell. This sound was a clear and urgent warning for all citizens, especially men, to clear the path, step aside, and avert their gaze. To even accidentally touch one of these warrior women was a crime punishable by death. They were far more than soldiers. They had become a sacred, untouchable class, the living, breathing embodiment of Dahomey's military might, revered by their people and feared by their enemies. Into this world of iron discipline and sacred blood, a prodigy was born. Her name was Seh-Dong-Hong-Beh. Like thousands of other young girls before her, she was recruited into the ranks of the Mino, her old life left behind for a new existence defined by the musket and the blade. From the very beginning, however, it was profoundly clear that she was different. While the formal historical records of Dahomey, many of which were oral or lost to time, do not tell us much about her specific lineage or family background, her actions speak with a clarity that transcends written accounts. She possessed an extraordinary, almost preternatural talent for combat, a fluid grace and lethality that set her apart. More than that, she had a natural, undeniable gift for leadership, an aura of command that inspired both loyalty and fear in those who served alongside her. She quickly and thoroughly mastered the deadly trinity of weapons favored by the Amazons. She became an expert marksman with the flintlock musket, the essential tool for long-range fighting and volley fire that could break an enemy charge. But it was in the brutal, intimate chaos of close-quarters combat that her skills truly shone. She wielded the spear with deadly precision and the heavy-bladed axe with terrifying force. Her signature, however, was her mastery of the gubwa, the fearsome short sword with a broad, curved blade, an instrument designed not merely for stabbing or slashing, but for the swift and brutal act of decapitation, the ultimate proof of victory in Dahomeyan warfare. Her incredible skill in battle was matched only by her intensity as a commander. She became renowned for the effectiveness of her training methods, pushing her warriors to the absolute precipice of their physical and mental endurance, forging them into a reflection of her own formidable will. Consequently, Her ascent through the fiercely competitive ranks of the Mino was meteoric. By the year 1851, she had risen to become a prominent and highly respected leader within the Dahomey Amazons, an army whose total numbers some European observers estimated to be as large as 6,000 warriors, though modern historians suggest the true figure was likely closer to 2,000 or 3,000 elite soldiers. Her powerful image was immortalized in a detailed sketch made by a British naval commander, Frederick Forbes, an abolitionist who visited the court of King Gizo. His drawing shows a young woman who radiates an almost tangible aura of authority and confidence. She stands poised in her military uniform, a symbol of her elite status. In one hand, she confidently holds a musket, signifying her role as a modern soldier. But it is her other hand that holds the most arresting and stark symbol of her prowess. She grips the severed head of a defeated enemy, a gruesome but undeniable testament to her success and ruthlessness on the battlefield. While the legend that has grown around her calls her a 16-year-old general, her exact age at the height of her power remains unknown, as does the precise scope of her command, whether she led a single regiment or held authority over the entire corps. What we know for certain is that she was not a myth. Seh-Dong-Hong-Beh was a real, celebrated, and deeply feared warrior leader. Under her command, the Amazons were the razor-sharp spearhead of Dahomey's army, and she was a key instrument for carrying out the will of her king, Gizo, and fulfilling that most sacred, foundational duty, to make Dahomey ever larger. That sacred and unrelenting duty soon led Seh-Dong-Hong-Beh and her formidable army to their greatest and most fateful test. The target was a city that had long been a thorn in Dahomey's side, Abeokuta, a sprawling, fortified city populated by the Egba people, Dahomey's inveterate rivals. But Abeokuta was far more than just an enemy stronghold. It had become a potent symbol. Founded in 1825 by Egba refugees, its name meant "under the rock," a reference to the massive granite formations that gave it natural defenses. It had grown into a sanctuary, a safe haven for those fleeing the brutal slave raids conducted by Dahomey and other states. It was a beacon of defiance in the region, a living rebuke to Dahomey's primary source of wealth and power. For King Gizo and his kingdom, whose economy was deeply and grimly intertwined with the slave trade, the conquest of Abeokuta represented a dual objective of immense importance. It would mean the destruction of a powerful commercial and military rival, and it would provide the opportunity to capture thousands of people to be sold as slaves. The very wealth of the kingdom depended on this victory. In the early months of 1851, a palpable tension hung over the region. Even as British diplomats were present in King Gizo's court, attempting to persuade him with treaties and threats to abandon the slave trade, Dahomey was secretly and meticulously preparing for its largest military campaign in a generation. The deception was complete. On the fateful morning of March 3, 1851, the attack was unleashed. An enormous Dahomeyan army, numbering over 10,000 soldiers, descended upon Abeokuta. At the very front of this massive force, serving as the vanguard and the primary shock troops, were the Mino, the Dahomey Amazons, led by commanders like Seh-Dong-Hong-Beh. The ensuing battle was an explosion of savagery and desperation. The Amazons, driven by their rigorous training and unyielding loyalty, fought with a ferocity that stunned even the battle-hardened Egba defenders. The city was protected by a deep, wide trench that ran before its high earthen walls. In an act of shocking sacrifice and tactical ingenuity, the Amazons charged forward into this trench, willingly filling it with their own bodies to create a human bridge, allowing the waves of warriors behind them to surge forward and reach the walls. For a moment, it seemed as if their sheer momentum and fanatical courage were unstoppable. Accounts from European missionaries who were trapped inside the city during the siege describe how the Dahomeyan women fought with a breathtaking, almost suicidal courage. They were the first and only contingent of the Dahomeyan army that managed to breach the city's formidable outer walls and pour into the city. But Abeokuta was prepared. Its walls were high and well-maintained, and its defenders were not merely soldiers fighting for a king. They were people fighting for their homes, their families, and their freedom from enslavement. This gave them a desperate strength. Furthermore, they were exceptionally well-armed. Through their own trade networks, they had acquired superior European guns, which gave them a crucial advantage in firepower over the Dahomeyan army's older muskets. The battle devolved into a brutal, hand-to-hand struggle that raged for days upon the city walls and in the streets beyond. Despite their incredible bravery and initial success, the Amazons could not secure a lasting foothold. They were met with equally ferocious resistance, and ultimately, the tide turned. They were pushed back from the walls, their attack faltering under the superior firepower and desperate defense of the Egba. The Dahomeyan army, having sustained catastrophic losses, was forced into a full-scale retreat. It was a devastating, humiliating defeat for Dahomey. And yet, paradoxically, even in this crushing failure, the legend of the Amazons and their young leader grew even larger. They were the only ones who had managed to break through the walls of Abeokuta, the strongest fortress in the region. The terror they had inspired in the defenders, the image of them scaling the walls and fighting with such unbridled fury, cemented their reputation as an almost supernatural force of nature. Seh-Dong-Hong-Beh had led her warriors into a brutal defeat, but in doing so, she had also proven beyond any doubt that they were the most formidable and courageous fighters in the land. The defeat at the gates of Abeokuta was a profound turning point for the kingdom of Dahomey. The loss of thousands of its finest soldiers, including many of the elite Mino, was a severe military blow. This failure, combined with intensifying pressure from the British, who followed through on their threats by imposing a punishing naval blockade on Dahomey's ports, crippled the kingdom's economy. This two-pronged pressure forced King Gizo into a corner. In 1852, a year after the disastrous campaign, he formally agreed to a treaty to end the slave trade. But this was a promise made under duress. The economic pull of the trade, which had been the foundation of the kingdom's wealth for generations, was too powerful to resist. The raids and the selling of human beings eventually resumed. It is here, in the murky aftermath of this pivotal moment, that the historical trail of Seh-Dong-Hong-Beh grows cold. Her story, once so vivid, fades from the written record. Some accounts, more speculative in nature, suggest a dramatic and defiant final act. They hint that she may have later rebelled against King Gizo himself, furious when he went back on his promise to end the slave raids, a stunning act of defiance against the monarch to whom she had sworn absolute loyalty. This, however, remains unproven speculation, a tantalizing but unconfirmed possibility. After 1851, her personal story is lost to us. We do not know if she fell in a later, unrecorded battle, if she was quietly retired from service, or if, as the more dramatic theories suggest, she was executed for treason. Her ultimate fate remains one of history's great unsolved mysteries. Her legacy, and the broader legacy of the Mino, is a tangled, challenging mix of empowerment, violence, defiance, and tragedy. These women shattered every conceivable gender role of their era, rising to positions of incredible power and prestige in a world dominated by men. They were revered as sacred mothers, feared as ruthless killers. They were the terror of West Africa, the elite soldiers of a proud and powerful kingdom, and ultimately, the last defenders of their home against the inexorable tide of colonial invasion. They were the Dahomey Amazons, and their most celebrated leader was a young woman who, for a brilliant, violent, and unforgettable moment in time, terrified empires. The world is full of forgotten warriors and hidden histories just like this one. Are there any others you think deserve to have their story told? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to uncover more incredible stories lost to time, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching.